We finally have an announcement. The biggest star in the sport of mixed martial arts is confirmed to make his return to the UFC octagon. But it's not as straightforward as some might have expected. Instead of getting a date for a pay-per-view, Conor McGregor will instead be returning to our television screens first, with the season of The Ultimate Fighter against Michael Chandler. This will be Conor's second appearance as a TUF coach, following his 2015 appearance on the show opposite Urijah Faber. For Chandler, this announcement will stand as yet another major indicator of just how successful his late-career UFC run has been. Dana White broke the news on the UFC's official social platforms, confirming the news to the fans on Saturday morning. As you would expect, the reaction from the fans and fighters was one of excitement, with most people agreeing that this fight is the perfect way to gauge just how ready Conor McGregor is for a return to the top flight. Here are some of the best reactions from the MMA community.
It's time!
Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier is a man who has quite a lot of experience with both of these guys in the past. Across 3 fights, he engaged in one of the sport's most vicious rivalries with McGregor, going 2-1 over the Notorious, with the final 2 fights hitting some major numbers at the box office. Last time around, he went to war with Michael Chandler, putting on an instant classic back-and-forth brawl that eventually ended with him scoring a submission win in the final round. Dustin has every right to feel like he's a better fighter than both of these guys, and when the announcement came that McGregor and Chandler had signed to fight, Poirier jumped in with a hilarious shot at both of them. Funnily enough, Poirier wasn't the only one who was ready to earn a few laughs from this news. Dustin's old opponent Michael Johnson chimed in to remind Poirier of their own shared history. Johnson welcomed Dustin to the lightweight division years ago with a first-round knockout. And though both men have enjoyed very different levels of success in the time since, the man has certainly scored a 10-9 on this one, that's for sure. Derek Brunson. UFC middleweight contender Derek Brunson was happy to report that the Ultimate Fighter franchise would receive a much-needed injection of excitement. In recent years, it's pretty fair to say that most fans have not been interested in the show's reality TV format. These days, it's a lot easier to get attention with something more straightforward like Dana White's Contender series. The results have really shown that. However, with that being said, there's no doubt that the McGregor vs. Chandler season of TUF is going to do huge numbers. Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley missed out on giving his live reaction to the news by a number of hours. But as it turns out, he already gave us a pretty good sense of how he feels about this announcement on the very same day. Funnily enough, O'Malley and his brother weren't too impressed by the idea of Conor taking on Tony Ferguson over a season of TUF. Like the most people, sure, they were happy to see that El Cucuy was getting the opportunity he has clearly earned over the years. But Tony is 0-5 in his last 5 outings, and seeing Conor beat him wouldn't really answer too many questions about his suitability for the top flight. But beating Michael Chandler, that's a different proposition entirely. Sure, Chandler hasn't won every time he has stepped into the UFC octagon, but let's be real, he's a legit member of the lightweight top 10 and should be taken very seriously as an opponent for Conor. And as soon as O'Malley was offered Chandler as an alternative to Tony, his excitement was clear. That fight would be huge in comparison, were his exact thoughts, and truth be told, we have to agree on that one. Jake Paul. Jake Paul's emergence as a voice for fighter rights was one of the strangest things about his emergence as a boxer in recent times. Sure, Jake probably has an ulterior motive when taking shots at Dana White and the UFC, especially now that he has signed for PFL, but when it comes to his take on Chandler vs. McGregor, he was quick to give the UFC brass props for being able to put on such a huge fight with a pair of athletes who are not technically in good form. Okay, so maybe he was taking a dig at these 2 lightweights more than anything else. But even with that being the case, we're sure that Jake will be tuning in with some real interest whenever they do step into the cage together. The idea of this younger Paul brother fighting McGregor someday doesn't seem as outlandish as it once did, especially now that Jake has shared the ring with former UFC stars like Ben Askren, Tyron Woodley, and Anderson Silva. And the fact that he managed to beat them all, yeah, Jake Paul is here to stay, that's for sure. Michael Chandler. So what about Michael Chandler? Well, the former 3-time Bellator champion gave a number of high-profile interviews on the day of this fight's announcement, making up for the total lack of interviews that we should expect from McGregor anytime soon. And in the most Michael Chandler way possible, he delivered a perfectly articulated rundown of what the fans should expect. telling them that even though the fight itself hasn't been made official, in his mind, the competition between himself and McGregor begins as soon as the Ultimate Fighter starts filming. Already it seems that Conor might have to deal with someone standing opposite him who is actually more talented on the mic. Sure, McGregor is the funnier, sharper trash talker, and he has a natural wit that Chandler cannot touch, but this dude was simply born to have a microphone in front of him. Already it's pretty clear that the UFC are going to strike gold with this one. It's just crazy to think that we will get to see those two gigantic personalities sharing the screen for weeks on end before they even get into their fight camp. And if things do get ugly within their relationship, there's a real chance that this event could do monster pay-per-view numbers at the box office. Chris Curtis. Funnily enough, UFC middleweight Chris Curtis confirmed that Michael Chandler is exactly like you would expect him to be behind the scenes, citing his habit for delivering motivational speeches. The dude is truly one of a kind, and even when the cameras are not rolling, it seems clear that he is still the very same Michael Chandler we all know and love. USADA. Next, we come to an interesting note from the anti-doping agency USADA, who made a point of releasing a statement to coincide with this fight's announcement. When Conor McGregor made a series of posts looking quite a bit more jacked than usual, many fans started to speculate over him potentially using banned substances to help with his recovery from injury. This, as you would expect, opened a wide conversation about how much freedom athletes should have. But the most surprising revelation of all was that Conor had not been tested by USADA all the way through 2022, meaning that he had some form of exemption, despite not being retired and clearly under contract by the UFC. After the Chandler fight was announced, USADA put out a statement confirming that McGregor still had not re-entered their testing pool. And according to their official regulations, he would not be eligible to compete for 6 months after his first test submission. This means that we won't see Conor until at least August, but given that the show doesn't finish airing until August, we already know that much. We're sure that McGregor will be pushed back into the testing pool before too long. And as things stand, the rumor mill seems to suggest that September is the most likely month for this fight to take place. That will allow the MMA world to catch their breath after the latest season of TUF, before the pre-fight build-up really kicks off. As for Conor himself, there hasn't been anything to report. As we all know, he is well aware of just how easy it will be for him to cause a major stir when he does make his first statement. But for now, it's total radio silence from the Notorious. That of course won't last long, knowing him. And the idea of seeing the sport's biggest star with a camera in front of his face for weeks upon weeks will no doubt give us a better sense of exactly where his head is at. Whether he will jump into a full-on ESPN interview like Michael Chandler remains to be seen, but 2023 is already setting up to be one hell of a year for the UFC's biggest stars. All we can do now is wait for more details to emerge. As things stand, we don't know anything about the fight's date, venue, or even the weight class these two will be competing at. On top of this, the season of TUF itself remains a total mystery. McGregor and Chandler are confirmed to be the coaches, but the two divisions that will take part have not been yet declared. With the show set to begin filming within the coming weeks, we're sure that we will get answers to our many questions before long. But what do you think of Michael Chandler as a return opponent for Conor McGregor? And of the two, who do you think will come out on top when they step into the cage together?